All right, hi everybody. Book on Fire podcast.
Remember us.
Remember us. This is Dave. I'm here with Janet. Right before we hit record, we were just sitting here talking about the death of Jimmy Carter and wondering whether his funeral procession will have a riderless horse with backwards boots in the stirrups, like they sometimes do for presidents. Do they do that for all the presidents?
Because today is the day of his funeral.
Yeah. Today is January 9th, 2025. We are back at you after a long hiatus to wrap up, finally, after about 2 years running, the third season of the Book on Fire podcast, the season in which we've read The Dawn of Everything.
What a year. What a couple of years.
Yeah, what a couple of years. What a year 2024 was. What a time it has been since we put out the last episode. I feel like this isn't the first time we've come back and been like, phew.
That's the
Life's been real, y'all.
Yeah.
But in the meantime,
life got extra real this time.
Mm-hmm.
Because 2 weeks after we published our interview with our friend Nick,
Hurricane Helene came and brought record amounts of rainfall to Western North Carolina, where the podcast is based.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to tell you all about how destructive that was to the area. But we do want to tell you all that we were fine.
Mm-hmm.
We were here. There was definitely a storm. It rained a lot. We got about 9 inches of rain in the space of 3 days. It tested the water drainage systems, and it was a test to how well the land could handle water and channel water. And there was a bunch of wind. And there were some trees that fell, especially up on the ridge above our house.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of trees that fell up on the ridge.
Like big 100-year-old oak trees.
Like piles of full-grown trees that we knew.
Yeah.
Including an old apple tree that we visit every year that's toppled over and is not going to make it. Yeah. But around where we live and the part of the woods here that we inhabit, nothing was damaged.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very grateful for that. We did have to spend a couple hours with the chainsaw cutting our way out of the land through our driveway where there were some trees. But mainly the story of destruction and loss of life and displacement in the wake of Helene is not our story.
No, although the building where we have our clinic space, and that is also the Terra Silva classroom, it did flood on the island in Marshall. The downstairs of Marshall High Studios flooded pretty heavily all the way up to the second floor, but not into the second floor. So our clinic space, our studio, was not flooded. And we actually hope to be back in there in the next couple weeks, seeing clients again. And we were also spared in that space. They're remodeling the bottom. Marshall community came together and with the help of volunteers from other places in a way that has been truly inspiring.
Yeah.
The downtown has been cleaned up and is being rebuilt very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been amazing to watch. A lot of other towns that were harder hit are going to have a slower rebuild.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. The building where our clinic space and classroom and office and everything is on an island in a river.
Right.
And the river flooded like 25 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely, the whole island is, destroyed isn't the word, but it's like
most of the
scalped
most of the
all
trees,
vegetation almost.
Yeah, most of the trees were taken out, and all the grass, most of the plants. I've seen some violets coming back up that hung in there, and I think a combined effort of different groups, including some people connected to the studios that we're part of, have been reseeding and replanting and working on getting it so it won't continue to be the weird dusty brown of the flood zone in the spring. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we've been through some stuff. And we're going to take a minute just to talk about how we've gotten to be part of some of the relief efforts here, because we are fortunate in that back in winter of 2016, 2017, Dave and I are founding members of a group called Rural Organizing and Resilience, which you may have heard of at this point because our mutual aid relief efforts within that group have gone somewhat viral in the wake of the storm. And we already had pretty solid structures in place for making decisions, for responding quickly, for getting things done, because we'd already been all working together with some change in the group over time since 2017.
Almost 8 years.
Yeah.
The group's been in existence, which isn't such a long time, but it feels like a long time in this day and age somehow, and a lot of us, or some of us anyway, have had relationships that go back even before that. And most of us, have lived in this rural county for a while and are very rooted here. So Roar was able, we call it Roar, was able to kind of get going with stuff. The hurricane hit Friday. We had a meeting on Monday after a couple days with the power out and just going around and checking on each other and making sure everybody was okay. And we opened a relief hub basically that day, like Monday or Tuesday. And since then we've had a hub going. The hub is still going. We're down to 3 days a week, but we have a distribution hub. We've distributed lots of, in the early days, it was like food and water and diapers and pet food, but also chainsaws and generators. And I don't know how many generators we've given out and helped start other hubs and supply other hubs. And, if you or a group that you're a part of, sent some money to Roar or participated in a fundraiser that was for Roar, because we have had a lot of money coming in very gratefully, or thankfully, from all over the country. People have done little fundraisers, big and small, and everything are just given to our PayPal and Venmo. And we've been able to turn around and give cash relief to lots of people who've been like waiting on FEMA checks or just
not eligible
or, lost their job or lost their trailer or, can't pay rent or for whatever reason, and we're facing eviction and all kinds of stuff. And it's felt really good, especially since Janet and I and like a lot of the people in Roar have been relatively more secure, unharmed by the storm or less harmed.
Yeah.
One of the things about this storm is that, most of the damage was from flooding or in some places landslides. And so the damage was very localized, so you were kind of like either you were hit hard or you weren't. And then so the people who weren't have been able to, rise, to try and provide neighbor to neighbor type of help for people, which sometimes isn't possible when an entire area is like being evacuated or burning up or whatever, like the wildfires in California right now. Every disaster is different.
Right. Yeah, so what's interesting here, we need to get on to talking about the book somewhat, but I am noting that as of yesterday was when I first learned about the wildfires in and around Los Angeles area, that the amount of time between crises feels like it's shrinking.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that is actually how it is or if it's just how it feels, but it feels like it's how it is, that the time between is shrinking. And so I'm hoping that as we talk about the book and do a little bit of a wrap up today, we can be talking about this. What kind of lives are we making? What kind of opportunities are there within the speeding up of climate crisis and within the current political context as well? Because this is 2025. It's January, and soon there will be an inauguration, and Donald Trump will start his second term.
Oh, yeah. We're looking forward to another Trump administration. That's another thing. Yeah.
Anyway.
Not looking forward in a positive sense.
But just looking too.
But we are, yeah.
And I think a lot of us are not only moving from crisis to crisis, but also just kind of like holding our breath.
Yeah.
He's feeling powerful. He's feeling excited. And this time he has an open group of oligarchs supporting him. This may have, there have always been big money people behind the scenes running things somewhat, but this time they're just out in the open. They might even have offices within the White House.
They're like publicly paying tribute
Yeah.
to him or something, as if he was a monarch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And then some of them are like direct advisors following around and telling him what to do. So it's an interesting time to be paying attention to the government. And for those of us who track fascist movements and track authoritarian regimes, we see a lot of things being put into place for that solidification of power. And this is an interesting time to wrap up talking about the dawn of everything, because the dawn of everything is about power, accumulation,
That's
consolidation, how societies are run, and examples of different times where people were able to carve out power in the face of authoritarian regimes.
Yeah, I was thinking, to sort of prepare for today's conversation and try and think about what does the dawn of everything mean to me in this moment as I sit right here, today, January 9th, 2025.
Yeah.
And, like my first thought is that one of the things that the last few months have impressed upon me, and I'll preface this by saying that this feeling never really goes away, but sometimes it surfaces more loudly or something, but just that I just feel like we need to be thinking about the long haul. Maybe feeling like that partially has to do with Trump coming back into power and like trying to ward off a certain amount of just being reactive to that or catastrophizing around Trump, but also just in general, climate crisis, ongoing disasters. We just really have to be oriented towards the long game in so many different ways. And that made me think of the book, because the book really is, in a lot of ways, arguably, maybe this is a point that could be debated, but maybe gives us more lessons for the long game than it does for the short.
Yeah. It's not a playbook.
It's not like, it's not a book about navigating a particular historical moment, or even that like is intending to deliver very usable tools for that, but more a book about thinking about the long game. I mean, the dawn of everything, it's sweeping, right? To think about the long game and to help us to think about the long game in ways that aren't too constrained by what we think past events must mean. Right.
Yeah.
That is what the book, maybe the biggest thing that the book is trying to do.
Yeah, I think when I've been considering looking back over the book, which part of me was hoping to do like kind of a nice wrap up of the whole book, but now my mind has been so, I don't want to say scattered. There's a lot on my mind. And I actually feel quite focused, but I feel less in a place where I feel like I'm like, all right, I'm ready to spend 2 hours just rounding out and really going over the book again.
Sure.
What I feel more like is thinking about the book and what did we learn? What lessons do we have right now? And as this moment in time feels crucial in some ways, and maybe we feel that way all the time, I know that one of the characteristic traits of the time that we're living in is that everything feels urgent. But there does seem to be an important turning point happening right now with the consolidation of power, with both the tech industry, but also the billionaire class sort of closing ranks together. We're in an interesting moment. And we also are recording this a couple months after the political assassination of a healthcare executive.
Right.
Which is an important thing to note. Because that
also helps set the tone for
it sets the tone.
What,
yes. Because that response was absolutely the closest I've seen to class consciousness across the spectrum of bipartisan politics that I've maybe seen in my life.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, everyone is screwed over by the healthcare system. Like everyone. Yeah,
class consciousness, and also just like underscoring the very peculiarly fucked up nature of the way healthcare delivery happens in America.
Yeah. People around the world were like, you have what going on there? We always
This is how healthcare is distributed to people? Like, this is how you access healthcare through this?
Shocking. Yeah. It's shocking to anyone else in a country with resources. that they have access to.
Yeah.
It like absolutely is. So we also have this larger context where you see people actually being like, right, take out the CEOs, send a message.
Mm-hmm.
And you see like within a week of that assassination, all of these insurers starting to actually like be like, actually, that thing that we said about how we were only going to pay for part of the anesthesia during surgery, we changed our mind. There was some like immediate policy change that week, and in North Carolina.
Does that mean they like have to wake you up halfway through?
It just means you're going to be charged afterwards.
Oh, you're charged, of course. Yeah.
But in North Carolina, a couple, like, I don't even remember how many people's debt was cleared by Atrium Health within the week of the assassination.
Uh-huh.
Tens of thousands of people.
Right.
And these are people who had liens on their homes because of medical debt.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to say that like these small moments of heroism, and I'm calling it that because that's what it is, they are creating change at a time when people are really seeing how the sausage is made. They're seeing the oligarchs are in charge. No one cares about our health. This place, no one is caring for us. And this is another theme that's coming from the Dawn and Everything, which is the state, if anything, is supposed to create the illusion of care. But the illusion is gone. Mm-hmm. We are not cared for.
Right.
And when you know you're not even being cared for, then you have some freedom with how you act, what you do, and what you organize towards.
Right. Yeah, you made me think. I think it was maybe one of the people on the It Can Happen Here podcast or something, reflecting maybe on the election and stuff. But the phrase that I remember is, it's not just the election of Trump that is bringing this to pass. It's just the way things are going in general. But we should expect the state to be absent or hostile.
Oh, right.
That's the way things are trending, is that increasingly the state will be absent or hostile.
Right. Yeah. Right. Neither party was discussing helping out with healthcare.
Yeah.
Neither party was addressing the housing crisis, And so also another current trend is that the rate of homelessness is up like 20% countrywide at the same time as it's been criminalized. Mm-hmm. And you see people from both parties helping clear camps as big photo ops. And there's a tightening up of nationalism from both parties.
Oh, yeah.
Anti-immigration sentiments and actions from both parties.
Right.
So this is the climate that we're in. And within that, we're having this rapid fire ecological crises happening in various parts of the country all of the time. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the world beyond that. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm thinking about the Dawn of Everything within this context, one thing that I was remembering was that a lot of their examples of those periods of relative freedom that happen, sometimes they're 500 years, sometimes they're 1,000 years, sometimes happen when there's been an ecological crisis that has pushed things to a head. When things are shaken up enough that there can be change, and it's easier because sometimes when there is when the edifice is actually literally cracked through earthquake or flood or devastation, then you have more openings for organizing, for changing things. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, but at the same time, you have to look out because also there's moments of ecological devastation throughout the historic record in which those were also moments in which power opportunistically consolidates and takes over an area or takes over a people and a way of doing things. Yeah. So the ongoing polycrisis, there may be a lot of different little moments of both opportunities for freedom, but we also need to be watching out for opportunities for capture.
Yeah.
So that's one thing on my mind. And then within that, if I'm thinking about the possibility for freedom and increased autonomy.
I'm glad you are.
Yeah. trying my best over here. Within that and being like, well, okay, if this is such a moment, we have a lot of different factors in place. We have like the obvious abuse of power happening. We also have ecological crises ongoing. Mm-hmm. Then what does the book tell me about that? What does the book tell me about conceiving of freedom and conceiving of societal change? Mm-hmm. And from that, I would say that I've learned from the dawn of everything that even if I don't always agree with them, they make a good case for the stories that we've been told about freedom throughout history, or through what power looks like throughout history, have been skewed a certain way. So that if we don't question those teachings, we will think that we aren't going to be able to create a free society if there's agriculture. We won't be able to create a free society if there are cities. We won't be able to create a free society if there's settlement. And they systematically went through and questioned all of those in a way that I found somewhat convincing. And again, not with every point, but still.
Yeah.
I did. And so I think that in this moment where we're here in the shakeup, we're here in a time when we are saying things have to change. Things have to change. We should be keeping in mind that we don't have to dream of a utopia that seems impossible, and we should work with what we've got. We don't need to think of a pre-agricultural rural existence. We can work within whatever structures we're existing in to work to create networks to build power, to conceive of creating more collective autonomy together.
Yeah.
Without some sort of like idealized future that things have to look like.
Right.
Without a preconceived notion of what that is.
Right. Where does Mars colonization fit onto that?
Oh, God.
Is that a possible or impossible future?
I think Mars colonization is a possible future. It seems to be a priority for some people who are close to the top, power-wise.
Yeah. All the resources of the American state are about to be put into that goal.
Yeah. So I don't know apparently those people are going to get to create their own utopias. So if you believe that guy, we'll see.
Anyway, no, but seriously, no, I think you make a good point.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about those things. And alongside that, I'm grateful that the Davids remind us that what you do continuously see in situations where power is consolidated and systems of domination are put in place is a kernel of male domination at the core. There is usually some pattern of male domination, sexism, misogyny, that initial seed of fascism is there in that relation.
Yeah.
And so what I do think is whatever we're trying to do, whatever worlds we're hoping to be able to imagine into existence and make happen within this crumbling empire, we have to actually remember that if we allow that to happen, that will be the foundation of the culture.
Yeah, right.
So that is something that seems to be true across the board.
Yeah, patriarchy is the original form of oppression.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that is maybe safe to say.
I think it's safe to say as well.
Yeah. And by that, the implication of that is that like it is lurking at all times.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Potential or actual. Yeah.
And I just want to acknowledge that I know that what I'm talking about feels very idealistic and like pie in the sky, like we can do it, like, which is maybe the main criticism of Down and of Everything is it's just like, you just have to decide, we made this world, we'll make a new one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a carnival of possibility.
Right.
Or something.
So,
I mean, that's the caricature.
That's the caricature, but I do want to emphasize here that organizing with your friends, organizing with community is not as hard as it sounds. A lot of the work supporting Roar that we did, or at least that I was doing in the fall, I wasn't leaving the house. I was doing a lot of work from the computer, collecting funds, redistributing funds. We were doing so much from here. It was honestly a bit of an annoying full-time job, but still, I didn't have to be like out and about. There's work to be done at home. There's work to be done out in the world, whatever your skill set is. But also, like, you shouldn't underestimate what is possible with a small group of people. And there are going to be many emergent needs. There already are, but there will be more. And figuring out a finite thing to work on is a great place to start. Because part of what we have to be doing right now, if we're hoping to address the ongoing harm that's happening, much less to actually shift towards new ways of being in the world as a society,
Yeah.
is we have to actually learn to work together, to make decisions together, to have process, to problem solve together.
Mm-hmm.
And this
And
stuff,
get practice doing
and
it.
get practice. It's not
Yeah.
easy.
Mhm.
It's like a muscle you have to learn to use. You
Mhm.
have to work out the muscle. The muscle is required to work with other people and to actually navigate all of the different personalities, talk about the problems at hand, see what people's strengths are, and work together to get shit done. And when you get practice in that, it just feels so good.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start
Yeah.
off somewhere, and then you build up that skill set. And when you do that, then you are doing the work necessary to transform the world, partially through
Mm-hmm.
discussion, collaboration, network building, power building. And we have to do that work together. So
Mm-hmm.
part of what I've also been thinking about that, because that's a recurring theme in the book as well,
Yeah.
which is the discussion, the decision making,
Mm-hmm.
the like true weighing of options and coming to consensus is part of the work, you know?
Yeah.
So
And the different, I mean, now you are making me really think about the book, because part of it is like, I was thinking about mutual aid.
Mhm.
I mean, mutual aid is not the end all be all of everything, but it's something that's fresh on our minds because we've just been through this experience. And there's organizing, there's meetings, and there's decision making, but there's also lots of room for people to plug in
mhm,
that doesn't even necessarily involve that.
Right.
Right. Because you're picking up a load of something and bringing it to this
Mhm.
other place or whatever.
Mhm.
Right. And I'm saying that just because, making a difference and pitching in, involves, lots of different kinds of activity.
mhm,
And some of that activity is not even governed by the decisions of this little group of people who are meeting over here.
mhm.
Right. And that's part of what the Davids are tracking in the Dawn of Everything as well, is decisions and even leaders who don't have coercive power.
Mhm.
Right. And who aren't controlling everything.
Right.
Right. And how like power and autonomy is distributed in situations so that like everything doesn't trickle down
Mhm.
from what gets decided by a person or a group of people
Right.
either, and the organizing that we do now and will need to do and will continue to do or whatever has room for all of that
Mhm.
in it too. And so it's good to be reminded of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I would just say about all of this is that there's an expression that I try to use to keep myself from being perfectionist.
Well,
Wait.
let me guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Tell me what it is.
Oh, you know what it is.
Rome wasn't built in a day?
No.
That wouldn't be right anyway.
Just that I try to remind myself not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Oh, yeah.
And I say that partially to be, I feel like those of us who envision a different world and want to make that happen can easily fall into criticism, into like community conflict, or to just like our ideal being far away, and any kind of imperfections along the way can keep us from moving towards that.
Yeah.
And what I kind of did like, this is again the carnival of possibilities maybe, but
Yeah.
is that a lot of times when people are working to get free together, it's messy and
Yeah.
doesn't always look great. Sometimes you have to work with people you don't like that much, or people you don't agree with about some things, but just remembering that the point being to like build networks of care, building networks where we can build power together,
Mm-hmm.
and that the moments and even short periods of time when we feel relatively free are important because they remind us of what is possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know who I would be and like what my survival and perseverance strategies would look like if I didn't have those moments
Right.
that you're talking about to draw on,
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of keep me going.
Right.
Yeah. 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 Well, this is going to be a kind of short episode, you know, and because we're not really reopening the book.
The broad
in
strokes.
this one, we just kind of want to tie it all together and give you all a little bit of a life update and sign off. We are going to talk a little bit about what we're reading right now. But before we do that, there is a Dawn of Everything update that I want to share. And this will be a link that I'm going to put in the show notes. But this was, so, you know, the Dawn of Everything was published more than 3 years ago. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it took us more than a year to even get started on the podcast. So it was like fall of 2021. But the book is still being like digested, you know, by the academic community, and just initially there's a bunch of reviews, and then, you know, there's the critical ones, and then there's the responses to those, and like all this stuff. But the book has raised a lot of questions, and good thing we still have David Wengrow, because he is out there like speaking for the book and for their collaboration and helping to clarify, like, this is what we mean by that. This is what we were trying to do here. Hey, look, you all are getting this wrong. You know, let me clarify all of this type of stuff. And another one of those efforts by David Wengrow was published recently, or at least a preprint was published. I'm not sure if it's fully published now, but in an academic journal called Contemporary Political Theory or something like that. It was a good article. It was called On Historical Materialism and the Dawn of Everything, from like a kind of collaborative conversation on a theme that was taking place in this journal. And the theme was called Material Conditions and Human Freedom. And so, you know, I think it's especially relevant for those of you who've listened to us talk about the Dawn of Everything, because you know that there have been like critiques that have come from so-called materialists about the Dawn of Everything not really being fair to people with a more materialist analysis. And in this piece by Wengrow, he very specifically responds to those criticisms. And he's actually, because it's this like kind of roundtable conversation, he's following up on a piece that somebody else wrote defending the Dawn of Everything against charges of anti-materialism, and he's adding onto it and stuff. But it's really a pretty good read. It's worth a read, you know, because he tries to clarify their position regarding materialist analyses like historical materialism, and he revisits the example of the Foragers of the Northwest, you know, which is the whole subject of chapter 5 in the book, and provides some more clarity around what they were trying to do with those examples and the schismogenesis and all of that. And I thought of that piece in what you were saying just a few minutes ago, Janet, because he mentions that maybe the biggest thing that the book was trying to do was trying to intervene in this thing that they kept seeing happen, which was that people, you know, like Steven Pinker or Jared Diamond or whatever, or Francis Fukuyama, like they have these examples in the book, but not just those people, but people in general who are trying to put their ideas that maybe they're a specialist in the context of like a bigger story of humanity or whatever, and who write these big books, you know, trying to talk about like what the influence of pandemics is on human society, you know, writ large or whatever, and looking at pandemics through the ages or whatever, to take one example. That people who write these books, they habitually draw from this well of sort of stock ideas about what the human story has been and just reproduce them uncritically, that have to do with the agricultural revolution and hunter-gatherers and
property,
cities, and maybe property or something, and all this stuff. And they're not specialists in that stuff, but they're bringing in what they think is just like settled common knowledge about these things. And the Davids are reading this. They see this happening and they're like, no, you know, all of this is still in flux. We don't think that anymore, you know, like like all this stuff. And so their goal was to write the big book that gets a lot of attention, and maybe like the next Jared Diamond that comes along and tries to write the big story can't ignore it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like make a big enough of a noise that they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, have you read this Dawn of Everything? Like, I don't know if you can just copy paste in this like story of early humanity or something anymore. That makes a lot of sense. for what the
Right.
book is trying to do.
And they really
Right.
successfully made it a big book a lot of people read.
Yeah.
They
Mhm.
did do that. How did they do that? Just because you want to do a thing doesn't mean you will, but a lot of people read it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with just the arc of David Graeber's
Right.
fame. I think we can call it fame, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting.
They wrote a very provocative, like, preview
and maybe this even
essay that
that's
introduced a lot of the themes that was really widely shared and read.
Mhm.
They called it The Dawn of Everything, a new history of humanity.
Right. He had a bold book jacket design.
Yeah, I mean, the publisher was definitely behind the book and promoted it a lot too. But yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that the world was ready for it
Right.
also in some way.
Right. So I guess part of what you're saying is like that a lot of folks who were like on the more granular level
Mhm.
were like, oh, you're taking this like study out of context, or this ethnography didn't say that, was like, they're kind of
Not
like,
the audience of the book
not the
or
audience
something.
of the
Yeah,
book.
I guess I wasn't even really trying to point that out, but maybe that is an implication
Yeah.
of, you know, in the piece I'm going to link to, Wengrow was talking to an academic audience about granular things.
Right.
But at the beginning of the piece, he said this thing that I just thought it was worth repeating because I thought
Totally.
it was interesting
Uh-huh.
about like why they maybe took the approach that they did in the
Right.
book. And it maybe answers some of the strategic choices that they made or something like
Mhm.
that. Gives greater context.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'll send a link to that or I'll put it in the notes. Yeah, it's fairly, like I said, it's an academic work, but it's
Mhm.
pretty darn readable, I thought, you know. So that's cool.
So many of you may be wondering, what are we doing next? What's the big book? And I will say that for now, we're taking a break. It took us 2 years to get through this one, and we're feeling like we need a break. I've been enjoying, even the last month, I've read a lot of other books instead of thinking about the dawn of everything all the time. And that's been nice. Dave and I are both working more intensively on our clinical practice this year. That's one of our plans. We're going to be doing a lot more in-depth clinical study and work, trying to honestly broaden our skill set for the increasingly worsening healthcare situation.
Precarious
healthcare situation in the world.
future of healthcare and stuff. Yeah.
So that's part of what we're going to be up to. So we're going to be focusing on that.
Working on the school,
Working on
always,
school.
you know, doing more material for herb school.
For herb school. And we're
And
going to
things
be
like that.
offering more small classes. And we also have a self-paced version of our Fundamentals of Community Herbalism program.
Yeah, that's right.
So just to say, we can put that in the show notes too. But if you're ever interested in taking an herb class, we will have more on offer soon.
If you're at all interested in studying herbalism, follow us because, we'll have short courses and things like that too coming out soon as well. And we're also planning to do some writing again.
Yeah.
Specifically related to our field, herbalism and holistic health and everything like that. We have a couple different writing projects, one of them collaborative in mind. Maybe, Anyway, we'll see. But, we've got some notes and some outlines and, they're about the practice of herbalism, but also about radical vitalism, which is an idea that we've been working with for a decade now. And we're always have new ideas about its relevance in the changing world. And so we're going to be writing about that hopefully in 2025, hopefully kind of soon. We'll see. So if you're interested in reading some of our writing that's herb adjacent, but not necessarily super granular herb related, then that'll be coming out soon.
Right. Yeah, our approach to holistic health is quite political and grounded in material conditions.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are some things that lay ahead for us.
Yeah. And we don't know what's the future of the podcast. We're hoping to come back at some point. We might change up the format a little bit and just do a book review once in a while to talk about a book we've read in one episode, which would be a little refreshing rather than living with a book for so long, even if it's a very engaging book.
Yeah.
For those who maybe weren't there for season 2 and you might want to go back there, we talked about Caliban and the Witch, Sylvia Federici's book, at the beginning of the lockdown. The initial year of the coronavirus epidemic, we were doing season 2 of the podcast.
Right.
And it was interesting to live with that book in that point, and I'm thinking I need to return to it now. But just to say that we've spent some long seasons and through difficult times talking about one book at a time. And so it might be nice to break it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Spend a shorter amount of time with books. Be able to read more books.
It's always interesting, to just have history happening in a big way while we're like, between history. Chapter 2 and chapter 3 or something of a book. And then it's like, yeah. Yeah. So it's very likely we'll be back with more discussion for y'all.
Right.
For sure. We just don't have exact plans.
But you can also join the Discord community to see what we're up to, and we'll make updates there as well.
Yeah, for sure. We'll keep the Discord going.
You just put a book review up there.
Yeah, I put a link in a short review of a book I just got done reading that I was kind of wanting to recommend. In fact, we were thinking about spending the rest of our time here sharing with y'all a little bit about what we've been reading, and maybe that will be a nice way to sign off what we've been reading, but also what we've got on our stack.
Yeah.
The book that Janet mentioned, I've been doing some like kind of hardcore political reading lately. I was kind of a phase of that. And the book that I posted onto the Discord was a book by Jamie Merchant called Endgame. We'll put all these in the notes as well, so you don't need to like pause and write these down in case you're interested. It's called Endgame: Economic Nationalism and Global Decline, which is it's a book of Marxist political economy, which is basically, a way of analyzing the current conditions of capitalism and what they mean for our daily lives, but also just what's happening in global capitalism. And, because it trickles down on us so much, right? And it defines, it sets the terms for things like political campaigns and why certain policies come to pass, why certain leaders emerge. And I thought that book did a really darn good job of just sort of informing the readers about like what is happening in global capitalism right now, which is undergoing a crisis.
Right.
And it's hard to sometimes hold or to realize that like capitalism is in crisis because you've also got like billionaires that take up a lot of space and corporations are like making record profits in some ways. And the stock market is, continuing to rise and stuff. So how is capitalism in crisis? This book answers that question and kind of gives you context for it. And also it gives you context for like why neoliberalism is getting thrown out by national governments all over the world in favor of like tariffs, economic protectionism, trade wars, all of this type of stuff. It's not just Trump. Biden was doing it too. Why are these things happening? The answer is in the internal dynamics of capitalism. It's only like a 200-page book. It's dense, but it's dense. Like not, but I think it's like readably dense, Anyway, that's a book that I read and that I recommended. It really helped me kind of understand a big picture of what's happening in the world. I also read this book basically right after the storm, that it was called Lifehouse, Taking Care of Ourselves in a World on Fire by Adam Greenfield. This is a book that it's about mutual aid, but also it's kind of about how we move from practicing mutual aid to practicing long-term mutual care.
Right.
And trying to develop this concept of mutual care as being something that we do already, period, but how to develop it as like a overt political practice beyond mutual aid, which can often take the form of something that, has peaks and valleys, right? It's like it's very needed and then it kind of goes into dormancy or something, right?
Right.
So that book was pretty good.
Cool.
Yeah. And what else? And the book that I've been reading right now, Janet just picked up for me at the Firestorm bookshop in Asheville. And it's by Peter Gelderloos, who's a anarchist author whose work I like. He's thoughtful. He's very thoughtful, and I find a lot of his analysis at least worth engaging with, and like thought provoking, right? Mm-hmm. He has this book that's really an essay, but it's like one of those essays that's long enough to kind of be put into a book. And it's called Organization, Continuity, and Community. This is relevant to some of what Janet was talking about earlier about getting together with people and making decisions. And it's, it's relevant to this topics in the dawn of everything for sure, because it's all about the nature of organization, the different ways that being organized can look, and how power can be shared or not inside of organizations, and just really exploring that with a lot of nuance from an anarchist perspective. So I'm in the middle of that book right now.
That's a pretty good haul.
Yeah.
I just ordered a lot of books. I realized that when we were just talking about what's in the stack, because I have the stack that is here and the stack that is in the mail as well, because part of the reason we're taking a break is so we can read some books.
Yeah. We're taking a break from our book club so we can read some books.
To prep for when we are putting out episodes consistently, which has not been the case for over 6 months.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time going back over each chapter, and I sometimes feel like I'm only reading one book.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
Even listening to it as a audiobook the whole time.
Yeah, you're like, am I memorizing this?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm here to do?
I've read it more than twice. I'll say that much. So right now I'm reading a book called Mad World, The Politics of Mental Health by Misha Fraser Carroll. And it's sort of a history of mental health in the way of like a history of psychiatry, a history of asylums. A lot of that sort of history will be review for people who know much about that topic, but it's still nice to see it all in one place and to see an analysis of the way that mental health is treated within our societies over time, and what would be like healthier community-based ways to approach mental health crises.
Yeah.
And so I'm reading that right now, sort of as a way to get my toes back in, because I've read a number of the source texts that are cited in here back when I was thinking about that more often. And I have been a little bit on break from thinking about mental health in the way that we approach mental health in the world that we live in, although that is one of the things that preoccupies my time sometimes. But I'm dipping my toes in with this sort of reintroduction into the topic, because as we approach various writing projects right now, Dave and I are both getting back into thinking about the way that societal context and material conditions affect the health of the body, mind in general. The whole body. What is holistic health? What does it mean what does it mean to talk about health in the current context in a world that sets us up for failure? And this world makes us crazy. This world makes us unhealthy. And so what does it mean to advocate for / create communities of care within that context?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm reading right now. I just finished a book called The End of Eddie, which is originally written in the French by a person named Edouard Louis. And it is a memoir of growing up queer and effeminate, gay and effeminate in rural France in a factory town. And
I read this book too.
Oh yeah. It's a good book.
It's good.
It's a good book. It's an intense memoir of bullying and violence and class deprivation. And so I will say it did make me think a lot about the difference between memoir in a class conscious context and memoir in a personal growth context or the individual journey of the hero.
Right.
It's not really that kind of story. And it was good for me to have some maybe bubble. It's
as much about
the class,
the world that he lives in and the context and the way that the society. Yeah.
It's a difficult read in reading the ongoing violence and bullying this person is experiencing, the protagonist. But also it's a good read as far as busting any bubbles you have about how idyllic village life is in France.
Mm-hmm.
Not the only book that I read that did that this year, but that was one of them. But also, it's helpful to just have a book that's based about an individual life that's not individualistic. Like when he tells his mom's story, get pregnant young, drop out of school, started having children, he's like, she thinks this is just her story, but it's everybody's story.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, he's talking about the ways that the world that he lives in sets people up to fail or to stay in their worker class, not able to leave the town, creating workers or being a worker, so material conditions still seeping into all these books that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a lot of good books on deck that I'm going to read, and maybe I'll put up some book reviews when I do them on the Discord channel when I do read them.
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about the stack that I'm getting to now.
I'm remembering we also read Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner.
We sure did.
Pretty good novel
I enjoyed
that has, it has political themes.
It does have political themes.
Which maybe that's not saying that much, but yeah. Anyway.
No, I really enjoyed Creation Lake. I'd be interested to talk to some other people about it sometime.
Pretty good audiobook.
Yeah.
Read by the author.
I'm looking forward to reading Alexis Pauline Gumb's Survival is a Promise, The Eternal Life of Audre Lorde. That's on my stack.
Oh, hell yeah.
And yeah, I got a lot of books I'm excited about getting down to. So we're hoping that you all will keep in touch with us, that you'll join our Discord community, which is not active daily, but we do put updates there.
Mm-hmm.
And other people talk to each other regularly there.
Mm-hmm.
See what we're up to. You can follow the link to our school website also.
Yeah.
If you want to learn about our class offerings.
Yeah. Yeah. And keep us subscribed if you want to be maybe surprised one day you wake up and there's a new episode of The Book on Fire.
I'm really hoping to lean into the short book review.
Yeah.
I love a book review.
I love that idea. I've always wanted to do that here.
Yeah.
So maybe we actually can.
We love book chat, but maybe we could learn to make our book chat a little shorter sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you all for your patience as we've spent these 2 years together, stretched out over time, discussing the dawn of everything amidst the poly crisis.
Such a book.
Huh? Yeah.
And such a crisis. But such a book. Like really every chapter is a feast.
Mm-hmm.
I'll miss it, kind of.
Yeah. You can always listen to the podcast.
That's true. That's what I'll be doing next, folks. Listening to season 3 of The Book on Fire, which ends now. Bye.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. Take care of each other.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Once again, we want to thank the band Big Blood for making the music that has formed our intro and outro for this season of the podcast, as well as music breaks. And I don't know, all throughout this season, you can hear Big Blood, some different songs. Also, we've heard music by Sarah Louise throughout the season and Ana Luisa as well. That accounts for most of the music. Right now, we're going to go out with something kind of different, though, a song we've been saving for the very end. From the label International Anthem, this is the band Irreversible Entanglements, Open the Gates.
Open the gates, we arrive. Energy time. Universal sound law, not guilty, not doing time, unbound. An offering for freedom. We hold you, solve forever's Neptune bliss. In exchange with Saturn, new Mars. Energy time. It's energy time. We arrive.